The year is 2014. The new Super Smash Bros. Game is going to be released late in the year, and so far, it looks stellar. What looks especially great are the slew of new characters being revealed. Some pretty notable figures, such as Megaman, Pacman, and Little Mac. Though one day, you turn on the latest character reveal trailer, and you see this.
Backslash! I'm really feeling it!
This trailer blew my 15-year-old mind. Up until this point, I had an inkling of where some of these new fighters came from. Even if I didn't play their games, I at least knew the franchise they represented. But I had no idea who Shulk was, and I certainly never heard of the game he was from. While Shulk ended up becoming one of my most played characters in Smash 4 and Ultimate, I never felt compelled to actually play the game he stars in. Not out of a lack of interest or anything, but mostly because I just never had the time. Between running this channel and partaking in the recreational activity known as breathing fresh air, I just didn't have a spare 70 hours laying around. Though, somewhat recently, I took about a month-long break from work, and during that time, I snagged myself a copy of Xenoblade Chronicles Switch port. I figured that since I had the free time, that I may as well spend it seeing what exactly the hubbub was about. A lot of people have been wanting me to talk about this game for a while now, and now that I've got the chance to sit down and actually play it, yeah, I can see why. This game is pretty sick. And in today's video, I'm going to tell you how I fell in love with Xenoblade Chronicles. Did you know that this isn't the first game in the series? It turns out that this game, Xenoblade Chronicles, is actually a subsection of a larger series. Yeah, there's Xenogears for the original PlayStation and Xenosaga for the PS2. I never hear anyone talk about these games, but I wouldn't mind trying them out at some point. I'm sure longtime Xenoblade fans already knew about this stuff, but it did come as a surprise to me. I mean, you look at the box. You see the lone blade buried deep in a long stretch of land, with a gigantic mech towering over in the distance. I thought, oh, that red sword must be the Xenoblade, and this game is the chronicle about that sword. Well, I was only half right on that. I'm not sure why this game is called Xenoblade, but the more that I think about it, the more likely that it was done for the sake of brand recognition. Oh right, we're talking about a video game. Something to keep in mind when looking to try out Xenoblade Chronicles is the version that you pick. This game was released on 3 different platforms. There's the original Wii release, the Switch version, and surprisingly, a port for the new 3DS. Wow, this is, something, that's for sure. While I do own a 3DS capture card, it's unfortunately an older model, so I didn't get a chance to try out this version for myself. For all intents and purposes, this is Xenoblade Chronicles, just on the 3DS. The fact that they managed to cram this entire game into a 3DS cartridge is nothing short of impressive, and for the first handheld crack at the series, it's kind of commendable. But I can't imagine playing this version over the other 2 options. Due to the law of averages, there's at least one person out there whose first and only experience with this franchise is through this version of the game, and I feel really bad for that person. However, I will be sticking with the updated Switch release, the self-entitled Definitive Edition. This version received quite a number of tweaks and improvements. Obviously, there's the resolution and texture increase, as well as some pretty handy quality of life additions. The main selling point of this version, however, is the bonus Future Connected campaign. This is a bonus epilogue of sorts that was supposedly cut from the original game. However, I won't be covering it for this video. I mainly want to focus on the core experience, since it was beefy enough already, and truth be told, I haven't touched Future Connected yet. Maybe someday I'll go through it, but not now. Also, be warned that there are going to be full spoilers in this video. I want to recount my experience with this game in detail, and in order to do that, I'm going to have to dive deep into the game's plot and characters. I highly recommend you do what I did and play this game as blind as possible. So this is going to be your warning to pause the video and come back once you've played the game yourself. With all that said and done, let's get started. Before life came into existence, there were 2 titans, the Bionis and the Mechanis. These 2 giants were locked in a seemingly never-ending duel. However, by the end of it all, there was no true victor, as both of the kaiju mortally wounded each other at the same time. As the years passed, life began to develop on both titans. Organic life would be born on the Bionis, with inorganic life being born on the Mechanis. Though, as life began, so did war. There are 2 distinct groups. There's the humanoid Homs, and their mechanical predators, the Mechon. These 2 factions have been at war for centuries, and with each passing day, the Mechon grow more and more deadly for the Homs. While this war is an important backdrop for Xenoblade Chronicles' world, the main story is primarily focused on a single individual. Meet Shulk, a young engineer who lives in Colony 9, a subsection of the Homs located on the Bionis' leg. We're introduced to some of his companions. There's the outspoken and well-meaning Rhine, the Mechon-slaying veteran Dunban, and finally there's Fiora, Dunban's younger sister and Shulk's childhood best friend. Shulk spends most of his days cooped up in his research facility, desperately trying to unlock the power of the legendary Monado. While this blade can't harm organic life, the Monado is the only weapon capable of damaging the Mechon. However, this power comes at a price. Only a select few are strong enough to wield its power, and even so, the blade takes a massive toll on the user. Shulk works tirelessly to unlock the Monado's secrets, so that the war between the Mechon and Homs can finally come to an end. However, on one fateful night, Colony 9 is suddenly invaded by the Mechon, and in a desperate attempt to keep the Mechon from getting their hands on the blade, Shulk discovers that he himself is worthy enough to wield the Monado. Not only that, but upon touching the sword, Shulk is suddenly flooded with premonitions of the future, which helps assist him in battle. With the Monado by his side, Shulk is able to help defend Colony 9, but not without any casualties, as this mysterious-faced Mechon kills Fiora right in front of his very eyes. Swearing to avenge his best friend, Shulk and Rhine embark on a journey the following day to unlock the secrets of the Monado, take down Metalface, and avenge Fiora. That's the basic premise of Xenoblade Chronicles, and while it might sound like your standard revenge story, there's a lot more to this game's narrative than what's initially presented, but I'll get into that later. For now, I want to focus on the opening chapters specifically, since I think they do an excellent job at establishing the world and character motivations. It's worth noting that I only gave the cliff notes in my summary. In actuality, the opening hours of Xenoblade Chronicles are pretty meaty and rich in terms of characterization. While the opening is kind of slow, it's not done without purpose. The main focus here is to establish the character relationships in a believable way, which is something that I believe the game does really well. Take Fiora for example. Her character is very short-lived, but her death still manages to feel impactful for me. She's one of the first party members you get, so I just sort of assumed that she would stay with you for the entirety of the game. They even tease you with these optional interactions that delve into her relationships with Shulk and Rhine. Establishing Fiora's character as much as they did made her death feel more impactful, and also gives Shulk agency in the story. For Shulk, his journey isn't about ending the war or saving the world, rather it's a more personal and tangible reason. It's some great stuff, and fully justifies the somewhat slow opening. What also helps sells this is the voice acting. It's no secret that in the English versions of Xenoblade Chronicles, the characters have distinct British accents. And yeah, I get that it's not everyone's cup of tea, but I don't know, I actually like it. I think that the accents give this game a distinct charm compared to other RPGs I play. Yeah, it's easy to make fun of the constant but aside from that, I find that the performances here are solid. If the accents really bother you, then you just play the game with the Japanese dub. But there's no way you can say that the voice acting in this game is bad.
I'll kill you!
But yeah, I like the opening of Xenoblade Chronicles, even if it's a little slow. While some people might just write off what I said as a cliche revenge story, trust me, as the story goes on, the world becomes much more complex and interesting than you might first realize. But before we get into that, we should talk about gameplay. The gameplay of Xenoblade Chronicles can be divided up into a few distinct facets. There's the exploration, side quests, and the battles. The combat is the foundation of basically everything you do in this game, and is easily the strongest facet of Xenoblade Chronicles from a gameplay standpoint. Xenoblade Chronicles features a less traditional battle system than other RPGs. While some players may call this an action RPG, I actually don't think that it's the best description. In Xenoblade Chronicles, you construct a team of 3 party members. You play as one of these characters while the rest are controlled by AI. Kind of like an MMO, you have 2 types of attacks. There's the standard auto attacks, which don't deal too much damage, and then there are your arts, which are your main bread and butter. Arts don't draw from any specific resource per se. There's no MP bar to worry about. Rather, arts function off of cooldown timers. Those who've seen my other videos know that I'm not usually a big fan of this design choice. Cooldown timers tend to be a boring mechanic for me, since all they do is arbitrarily limit how you approach any scenario. The best decision to make in those games is to just use all of your best attacks as soon as you can, since the time spent not casting is time that can be used recharging. What ends up happening is that there's a lot of downtime just spent sort of waiting around. Truth be told, Xenoblade Chronicles does suffer from that to an extent, especially at the start of the game. Though I find that in the long run, when taking every encounter throughout the game into consideration, I can say that this game uses cooldown timers in a much more appropriate way than most. On top of nearly every art dealing damage, most of them come with unique bonus abilities. Let's take Shulk for example, since he's the most obvious. Shulk has a wide variety of combat arts that can activate extra effects depending on his positioning. For example, backslash deals double the damage when you use it behind an enemy, and slit edge applies a defense debuff when it hits an enemy from the side. There are arts that focus on inflicting debuffs, arts that can break and knock down enemies, buffs, and status ailments. Since arts have these bonus effects for you to consider, if you want to get the most out of them, then you need to find the proper time to use them. Healing arts are a prime example of this. Something that I noticed almost right away is that Xenoblade Chronicles doesn't feature a traditional item system. There aren't any potions or medkits to buy, so instead, all healing is handled through arts. Healing arts have some of the longest cooldown timers in the game, sometimes taking longer than a minute to charge up. You want to maximize your healing potential, so instead of firing off Charlotte's healing right away, you might want to be more cautious with it. Maybe I don't need a heal right now, and I should instead heal when a character is in critical condition. Maybe I should hold off on air slash until I'm in a better position to use it. Gotta get the most out of those bonus effects after all. I don't want to use Dumb Band's stab move right away, since it combos nicely into some other arts that haven't recharged yet. The art system is at its best once your characters have all 8 slots filled. This means that downtime can be kept to a minimum since you're most likely going to have some options while waiting for your other arts to recharge. When looking at cooldown timers from this perspective, then there is some resource management to be found. Though, if I'm being honest, I still would have preferred a more active role in managing your skills. The closest we get to this are art upgrades, though you mostly buy those to increase the potency more than anything. The cooldown reduction you get from upgrades is just an added bonus, and doesn't change much about the overall skill, so that's out of the question. But there is a way I think they can improve this system. Auto attacks are somewhat useless on their own, but their true utility lies in how they're used to charge up a character's unique talent art. These are especially powerful skills that can be fired off in a pinch or deal some incredible damage with the right setup. Part of me wishes that all arts functioned like this. Instead of relying on strict cooldown timers, arts should recharge as you land hits on enemies. Not only does this give auto attacks an ever-present use outside of a singular art, but it gives you a much better reason to spec into haste buffs and double attack outside of just dealing bonus damage. Handling recharge in this way will also do a better job at providing immediate feedback. Choosing what arts to use goes from just waiting out the clock to forcing players to engage with the enemies. Want to use your arts? Then you should go in and deal some damage. I would much rather prefer this to cooldown timers since it keeps players constantly involved with the game's combat system. I can at least compliment Xenoblade Chronicles on having one of the better uses of cooldown timers, even if I find the idea in of itself flawed. Okay, that was a little more backhanded than I wanted it to be, but something that I legitimately enjoy about the combat system is how unique and varied the different characters are. In Xenoblade Chronicles, no two characters play the same. While there are some skills that overlap with a few characters, every party member serves a distinct purpose. Shulk is all about dealing positional damage and applying stat debuffs, with a little healing thrown in for good measure. Melia can summon elemental orbs that not only provide buffs, but can also be used to deal strong damage. Ricky has so much fucking HP and can inflict status ailments with ease. He even comes with an art that deals more damage based on how many elements you have on an enemy. Every character plays differently from each other, even those who fall into a similar archetype. Dumban and Ryan are both classified as tanks, but they handle the role in very different ways. Ryan comes equipped with aggro drawing arts and powerful physical skills while also being able to minimize damage with his shield. Dunban is a dodge tank. He has some skills that make enemies focus on him while also increasing his agility. If he isn't dodging, then his art combos can deal some good damage in the right hands. Characters in Xenoblade Chronicles are incredibly distinct from a gameplay perspective. Constructing a party will have you consider everything a character has at their disposal. If you think you absolutely need healing, you should put Charlotte on your team, but if you only need a little bit of healing, then Shulk and Ricky both have a heal skill. Most characters have small overlaps like this, but it doesn't mean that they're a total replacement for someone who specializes in those fields. The reason why so much focus is placed on individual character identity is because you only control one character at a time. Gameplay variety is integral so players don't get bored and put the game down. The best way to facilitate this is by making every character play differently from each other. And hey, as an added bonus, character arts are also fully customizable, making it so you can switch them out whenever you're not in battle. However, changing character arts serves two purposes. Since you're only in control of one character at a time in Xenoblade Chronicles, you need to rely on AI-controlled party members to pick up the slack. And you know what? They're actually pretty okay. The AI is able to recognize recognize the proper time to use certain skills. If you try to set up a break skill so someone else can topple, there's a large chance that they'll go for it, though the system isn't perfect. While there are some tactic commands, they're pretty limited. There's no way to change their combat behavior beyond focusing on whatever enemy you're currently locked onto. Skills that they use in battle are dictated entirely by themselves, and while the AI is smart enough to adapt to most situations, I feel as though a more hands-on tactic system would go a long way. Persona 3 is a pretty good example of this. That game handles its tactics through a dedicated menu and offers quite a few options to play around with. You can adjust whether or not you want them to focus on healing, dealing damage, knocking down enemies, and so on. This allows you to quickly come up with strategies and execute them without too much hassle. Granted, Persona 3 is a turn-based game and Xenoblade Chronicles is real-time, but I can imagine a world where the tactics available in this game have a bit more meat. Have a tactic for using support arts, one for damage arts, and one for knocking down enemies. Though, at the end of the day, I think this boils down to a difference in philosophy. Persona 3's tactics menu exists to simulate the feeling of being a squad leader. Everyone gets their orders and executes them to the best of their abilities, even if it isn't the most optimal strategy. While in Xenoblade Chronicles, every character is meant to be treated as equal. Cooperation and teamwork plays a large part in both the story and the gameplay, so controlling only one character in the combat makes a whole lot of sense. You're heavily encouraged to keep your party members safe and occasionally check up on them. You can even instantly cure status ailments for free just by walking up and talking to them in the fight. No better is this sense of camaraderie demonstrated than through the affinity system and chain attacks. Chain attacks are your ace in the hole for combat. Once you fill up this meter in the top left corner of the screen, you'll be able to execute a chain attack on whatever enemy you're locked onto. During a chain attack, your party members take turns attacking an enemy one after another. Not only do chain attacks momentarily refresh all of your arts, but they also allow you to temporarily take direct control of your entire party. The main goal with chain attacks is to deal as much damage as possible. While you might think you can and should just let loose with your most powerful skills and be done with it, it's actually not as simple as it might sound. What makes chain attacks better than any other option is the damage multiplier you can stack up. You might have noticed by now that every art in the game is color-coded. By using arts of the same color during a chain attack, you'll increase the multiplier on the bottom right corner of the screen. The higher the multiplier, the more proficient the skill will be. It's worth noting that you don't have to use the same color of an art to increase the multiplier. Talent arts set the color multiplier to gray, while also keeping the current multiplication. This means that you can follow it up with an art from a different class, to essentially switch what kind of skills you want to use. Chain attacks are incredibly versatile and deadly in the hands of a skilled player. With the right setup, you can completely turn the tides of battle through considered use of skills. One of my favorite things to do is build up the multiplier to max, and then hit the enemy with Dunban or Shulk's unique talent art. Shulk can decimate any megaman enemy with his Buster art, and Dunban's combo attack completely cuts through the small fry. I've also found that chain attacks work well as an emergency tactic if the party is in dire need of healing. Deal some damage with other characters, then fire off some party-wide healing with Charlotte. What's not to love? Chain attacks do require a lot of forward thinking from the player in two areas. Firstly, if you want to make the most out of the mechanic, then you need to construct a party with a similar enough art set, or at least one matching art color. Another thing for you to keep in mind is the party affinity. Now this is something that I'm incredibly mixed on. Every character starts off basically hating each other, but can grow a camaraderie by giving each other gifts, participating in bonding events, or most commonly, fighting alongside each other in battle. There are 5 stages to affinity, and you want to increase this with as many characters as possible. Not only does leveling up affinity allow you to give characters access to some pretty good passive skills, but the length of your chain attack is determined by party affinity. You're guaranteed at least 3 hits off of a chain attack, but if you want to get more hits, then you need to make sure that your current party has as much affinity towards each other as possible. But the thing that I hate about this system is that even with the max affinity, good passives, and high tension meter, ultimately, the length of your chain attack comes down to luck, baby. Something that you might notice is that the prompt to continue the chain attack sometimes doesn't show up. It makes you wonder if you're doing something wrong. I mean, I have a party of max affinity characters, shouldn't it be guaranteed at that point? Unfortunately, no. Chain attack continuations work off of a percentage chance, and while there are ways to make the odds sway more into your favor, there's almost no way to 100% guarantee a chain attack. I mean, there is one, but it requires so much affinity grinding with every single character in the game that no normal person is going to do it. As someone who went out of their way to do a lot of optional stuff, I definitely noticed a substantial improvement by the end of the game, but it wasn't consistent. Sometimes I got chains that lasted me a while, and other times they would end only after the first 3 attacks. The reason why this is an issue is because it makes the chain attack system a pain to strategize around. You can have the best strategy to take advantage of all your character's talent arts and skills, only for it to abruptly come to an end too soon because the game just decided you didn't deserve it. The inconsistent nature of chain attacks make them kind of a pain in the ass for most of the game. You build up the party gauge, get everyone into position, let loose a little, then it abruptly ends before you can take full advantage of it. It's so anticlimactic when that happens, and it honestly kills the mood a little. The worst part about this situation is that it has nothing to do with player skill. I'm doing everything the game asks of me. I understand how the system works, but I'm just not getting good enough rolls on the Xenoblade Chronicle slot machine. It sucks because when it works and I deal the big damage, it feels great. But when it doesn't work, I'm just left in my chair doing one of those disappointed nose exhales. I find it funny how the chain attacks more so come down to luck rather than teamwork. Considering that almost every other aspect of the game encourages cooperation and camaraderie, it's kind of ironic. I mean, to even fill the party gauge, you have to land combo attacks with your party. Breaking and toppling enemies is one of the best ways to max out the meter. That and responding to your party's encouragement at the right time. I think I would have preferred it more if the length of chain attacks was determined not by the affinity stat, but whether or not you're able to successfully continue a combo. What if instead of resetting the multiplier if you use the art of the wrong color, the chain would instead break instantly? Guarantee the first 3 hits, but if you want to continue the chain, then you need to get a multiplier of 3. Then any follow-up attack has to increase the multiplier if you want the chain to continue. It would preserve everything that I like about this system, but cutting out the unnecessary limitations. I get that my idea might not be flawless. The immediate issue I notice is that Melia would become one of the best character for chain attacks, while Charlotte would become one of the worst. But my counter argument to that is that Charlotte already isn't that good of a unit, so you probably weren't using her much anyway. Maybe toss on a chain attack turn cap to keep the damage from going completely out of control. I think the changes that I suggested would improve the system a lot, but that's not to say that I hate what's currently in place. It can be very satisfying when everything clicks together. It's a handy tool to use in a pinch when executing a combo. I just wish that it was a bit more reliable. Really, the only issues I take with Xenoblade Chronicles' combat system are the few instances where there's a lack of player involvement. Cooldown timers and chain attack RNG shit stand out as blemishes in what is otherwise a very solid foundation. There's a lot of deliberate choices in the battle system both in and out of combat that I often wonder why this game didn't attract more attention when it was initially released. Obviously, nowadays people know about this game, and it does have a substantial following, but at the time, that wasn't the case. Part of me feels as though this has to do with the platform that it was released on. The Wii isn't exactly well known for its RPGs, and the few that it did have weren't the most popular. My only guess is that audiences at the time weren't really interested in this kind of game, and it didn't help that Nintendo apparently made this one hard to get in North America. From the research that I've done into this game's history, I took note that this game was apparently a GameStop exclusive. While GameStop was pretty popular back in the day, limiting your product to one specific vendor inherently guts just how much reach you get. It's like how nowadays every YouTuber has a Twitter, Discord, and Patreon that you should totally donate to if you want to see more content like this. Without those separate avenues, it's hard to attract any substantial following on your own. To me, this screams that Nintendo didn't have much confidence in this game's performance. During the Wii era, Nintendo was fully invested in the idea of appealing to the casual gamer. You look at some of the best-selling titles and you notice a trend. They're all these very simplistic games that don't require too much dexterity or learning to get into, outside of maybe Zelda. When looking at it from a business perspective rather than an artistic perspective, I can definitely see where they're coming from, because I'm 100% certain that any normal person would turn the game off when they see the gem crafting system. Gems, and by extension gem crafting, plays a large part in Xenoblade Chronicles character customization. Gems are these little dudes doodads that you can attach to armor and weapons to provide yourself with some bonuses. A lot of these are stat increases, but there are a handful that provide the player with some more meaningful benefits. Stuff like increasing auto attack speed, decreasing the amount of aggro you draw with your attacks, percentage increases to ailments, and so on. Gems can be found out in the wild, but if you want to get the most out of them, then you're going to need to understand how forging your own gems works. Most of the rewards you get from enemies are these colored crystals. Each crystal has gem effects attached to them. While I won't go into full detail as to how crafting works and the most optimal way to do it, I will say that there's a lot that you need to consider. The main thing that you need to know about gem crafting is that it's a two-man process. You pair up two characters together and whoever you pick will decide certain effects. Whoever is shooting the gems will have a specific bonus effect activate, and the partner character will heat the furnace at different temperatures. Affinity plays a large part in gem crafting, and feels like a much more natural implementation of the mechanic rather than chain attacks. Crafting is a two-man job after all, so if you want to make the most out of it, then you need to have a partner that's on the same wavelength as you. The main benefit of gem crafting is the chance of upgrading your stat modifiers. If you're able to heat a gem above 200%, then that gem will be upgraded by 1 rank. But if you really plan ahead and have a little bit of luck on your side, then it's possible to heat a gem to the point where you get 2 for the price of 1. Gem crafting is extremely overwhelming, and honestly, the game doesn't do a great job at teaching the player how it works all too well. It's something that required me to do some outside research into understanding, but once I got the basic fundamentals down, things started to click into place for me. It's worth noting that gem crafting isn't required for most of the game, and is only necessary for end-game use. You can scrape by with just the gems you pick up out in the wild, but if you want to fully maximize your stats or get some really good gems early, then you better crack open the chemistry book and start studying. Something to keep in mind is that the bonus stats provided by gems have a hard cap. You can tell when you've reached it when your stat icon is colored blue. While you can equip a bunch of lower ranked gems to reach the stat cap, you really should be relying more on those high level gems. This is because they provide the most bang for your buck. Each piece of equipment has a certain number of gem slots, and some even come with gems built right in. Sometimes it's better to use worse equipment for the sake of gem slots or bonus abilities, which is some pretty meaningful decision making. You want to fully take advantage of free slots so you can diversify your character's stat portfolio, or in the case of specific characters, take advantage of their strengths. Shulk relies heavily on positional damage, which only works when he's not targeted by enemies. While he does have the Shadow Eye art to help keep him undetected, it only works so well on its own. If you want to take full advantage of Shulk's strengths, then you should give him gems that lower the aggro he receives while also boosting his debuff time. Melia uses a lot of elemental summons, max out her ether damage, and give her some element boosters. You can get a pretty decent idea as to what you should be focusing on just by looking at a character's playstyle. You don't have to min-max characters to finish the game, but it's still worth spending some time on. Like I said earlier, the best part about Xenoblade Chronicles from a gameplay sense is its combat system. It stands out as particularly polished, with a lot of thought and consideration put into it by the developers. There are a couple of design elements that I disagree with, but I wouldn't call many of those dips outright bad. Just a few elements that I believe could be improved with a slightly different approach. Aside from the road bumps here and there, the combat is still great and stands out as a highlight for me. Though, truth be told, that's because some of the elements surrounding the battle system are a bit on the weak side. The side quests in this game aren't very good. I know comparing Xenoblade to an MMO is very tired, and fans are definitely sick of it, but I mean, if the series wants to avoid these comparisons, then including busy work isn't the best way to do so. Most side missions in this game boil down to collecting objects in the wild, killing enemies until you get a certain drop, or fighting one of the unique monsters out in the world. I'll be honest, I didn't do every side quest in the game, but I did do a decent handful. Most of the time, you're rewarded with money and experience, maybe some exclusive equipment. There are a couple of side quests that give Shulk access to an exclusive Monado art, which is pretty cool, and from what I've gathered, there are some other rewards along those lines. But the overwhelming majority of the time, it was just flat experience, which is pretty lame. It's not even as if these quests tell any interesting stories. They mostly amount to errands or helping someone with research. Quests primarily exist as an excuse to interact with the world beyond the main story, but I was already doing that anyway. There's already plenty of incentive to explore and fight monsters, so I'd rather see the side quests do something more unique than just be the same thing that I'm already doing. The side quests definitely feel like quantity over quality and are the weakest part of Xenoblade's gameplay, but there's something weirdly addicting about completing them. There have been many nights where I just turn on some YouTube videos, sit back, and grind out some side quests. It's the same quality as eating potato chips. You know you shouldn't, and they really aren't that good for you when you think about it. But hey, I'll just have a couple more. Xenoblade's level design is a fairly unique topic. There are two distinct camps for it. There's the side that thinks that the stages are too big for their own good, and the side that believes the scale of the world is integral to the experience. I personally lean towards the latter. The different areas in the game are impressively large. It's sometimes easy to forget that this was originally a Wii game, and I don't even want to know what dark force I needed to pray to get this game running on the 3DS. The sheer size of the different appendages of the Bionis is almost breathtaking in a way, and the most impressive part about it is that there are no load times once you enter an area, assuming you didn't fast travel. While walking across the Bionis on foot is a little tedious, the game more than makes up for it through the impressive visual design. I really like how the Mechanis is always visible in the distance, acting as a constant reminder of the looming threat. Come to think of it, the Bionis and Mechanis contrast themselves in how the locations are constructed. The Bionis is home to everything organic. There's lush fields, tall mountains, wild animals, crystal clear water, and so on. The environment is naturalistic, and because of it, interiors are kept to a minimum. With a few exceptions, the majority of the map takes place outside, with the sun and moon always visible. In contrast, the Mechanis is industrialized. You spend a majority of your time there within the inner workings of the Titan. The map design becomes less organic and more structured. All natural sunlight is shrouded by the mechanical frame of the Mechanis, making it nearly impossible to tell what time it is. This contrast also exists in the enemy formations. The Bionis has a natural ecosystem. Nearly every enemy is some form of wildlife, with a couple of mechons strung about. But by the time you reach the Mechanis, all semblance of natural life is wiped out in favor of increasingly powerful mechon. This silent form of storytelling and world building is some good shit, and it more than makes up for this slower than average run speed. I quite enjoy the world of Xenoblade Chronicles from both an artistic and design perspective. Not only is it unique, but it's also memorable to traverse. The Bionis and the Mechanis are among some of my new favorite worlds in gaming, which is no easy feat to achieve. The gameplay of Xenoblade Chronicles is very good. As someone who mostly sticks to traditional RPG combat, I was surprised to see how much I got into this game from a gameplay sense. I was half expecting a somewhat undercooked mess of mechanics and design elements chosen to cater to a more mainstream audience, but the game isn't like that at all. There's a lot of polish to Xenoblade's core gameplay systems, even if there's some unfortunate lows to it. I can confidently say that I never got bored while playing it, though I didn't feel compelled to sample all of the content. It's mainly the side quests that drag it down for me. Not exactly a huge fan of the errand-like design to them, and none of them stick out to me as anything particularly special. But hey, it at least gave me an excuse to play around more with the game's unique combat mechanics, so that's a plus. What is special, on the other hand, is the game's story. Now, this was the part of the game that I was looking forward to the most before playing it. I heard great things about the narrative of this game for years, and intentionally went out of my way to avoid as many spoilers as possible. Aside from the main character, I knew nothing about this game's story before going into it, and honestly, I recommend everyone else do the same. The story of Xenoblade Chronicles is very compelling, with plenty of twists and turns that I don't want to spoil. So if you haven't played the game yet and have even a passing interest in trying it, then I highly recommend you do so before watching the rest of this video. This video is about my experience with the game after all, so that means that there's going to be spoilers from here on out. It's honestly funny looking back at the premise of this game's story after experiencing it in its entirety. There's a sense of purity in the simplicity of the inciting incident. Shulk and Rein embark on this quest for vengeance without realizing just how in over their heads they'll end up being. I want to say the first half of this game is made out to be the standard hero's journey, and during the duration of this, we're introduced to every main party member. Of course, there's Shulk, Rein, and Dunban, but there are a few more faces recruited on our journey. First, there's Sharla, a woman who, after losing her home and fiancé to the Mechon, joins Shulk's crew on her own quest for revenge, while also hoping to make a better future for her younger brother. If Dunban is the older brother of the group, then Sharla is definitely the sister figure, at least to Shulk, since Rein not so subtly develops some affection towards Sharla. Melia is a young woman of mixed heritage. She's half Homs and half High Intia, making her part royalty. And finally, there's Ricky, the greatest character in fiction. Ricky is a Napon who accumulated a mountain of debt thanks to his 10 kids, and now has to be the designated hero for his village to pay it off. Yeah, that's right, Ricky is actually in his 40s, believe it or not, and mostly exists to serve as comic relief. Xenoblade Chronicles has a lot going on in its story, and while the main narrative is mostly focused on Shulk's journey and his development, there's still a lot of time dedicated to fleshing out the other characters, as well as the group dynamic as a whole. The game does what the Persona series likes to do and baton passes the spotlight to one character at a time. For example, Chapter 9 is focused almost entirely on Melia and the political struggles that come with her mixed heritage. Melia is next in line to rule over the High Entia, but some of the current figureheads see her mixed heritage as an issue. They believe that only pure-blooded High Entia should be the ones eligible for the position. This chapter highlights Melia's struggles and perseverance through this problem, but ends up putting the rest of the story on pause to accomplish this. This can either be a good or a bad thing depending on your preferences. Good in the sense that there are large chunks of the story written to explicitly focus on one character, and get into the nitty-gritty of their struggles, but also a potential drawback if the execution is fumbled or just wasn't that interesting to begin with. Characters only have one shot to make their arcs resonate with the player, and if that opportunity is squandered, then good luck getting a second chance. Charlotte is the poster child for this. She makes a pretty good first impression, but her character ends up getting overshadowed by other elements in the plot. Unfortunately for her, there just wasn't exactly enough room for all of it to breathe, and because of it, she ends up as one of the lesser players in the story. The stuff with Melia is good because it acted as some necessary downtime. It allowed the player to catch their breath and prepare themselves for the big reveal that was coming in the following chapter. In comparison, Charlotte's character is battling for the spotlight, at a time when some big plot revelations for the main story are in effect. It doesn't get the necessary attention needed for it to resonate all too well with me, and is one of the few times where Xenoblade bites off a bit more than it can chew. But if your favorite character isn't highlighted during the main plot all too well, they are still developed through different avenues. There's been this strange trend going on lately where people believe that a character is only developed if they go through some grand arc that changes their perspective completely, as if no other means of character development exists and all media has to follow the same guideline to be considered good. In a similar way to a game like Neo: The World Ends With You, there's a lot you can glean from the characters based on how they interact with each other during cutscenes. A lot of emphasis is placed on the inter-party relationships, both in the story and especially through the optional heart-to-heart events. There's so much you can learn about a character based on how they act around others. Someone like Rein is demonstrated to be very protective and supportive of the people he cares about. He's always willing to lend an ear if you need it, and encourages Shulk to not burden the stress of being the Monado wielder by himself. Though Rein also feels as though he's got something to prove, and because of that, he sometimes lets his emotions overwhelm him. This results in Rein throwing himself into dangerous situations, but it's never out of a place of malice. It's always for the sake of someone else. Even a character like Ricky has a lot more going on under the hood than you might initially think. Ricky is primarily used for comic relief. He likes to boast about himself a lot, but we always see him complain about being tired or hungry. He has a very carefree and boastful persona, but deep down, Ricky is someone who does care quite a bit about his companions. This results in one of my favorite moments in the game. There's a point in the game where the group ends up separated from each other. Dunban, Ricky, and Melia wander around aimlessly looking for their friends. Eventually, Ricky starts doing his thing and begins to beg the other two to stop and call it in for the night. At first you think it's just Ricky being himself, but then it's revealed that the only reason why he wanted to stop was for Melia's sake. He'd noticed that she was exhausted and was pushing herself beyond her limits looking for the others. She sucked it up so she wouldn't be seen as a burden, and Ricky took notice of that. This is honestly such a strong piece of characterization, and goes a long way in humanizing this character in a way that feels genuine. The optional heart-to-heart events also go a long way in providing us with some extra texture. A lot of these are just characters shooting the shit with each other and reflecting on past events in a different context. We even get to hear about funny stories and interactions between characters that took place off-screen. This is some good stuff, though there is one issue I take with the heart-to-hearts. I feel as though for how vital they are to fleshing out certain character dynamics, that the requirements necessary to experience them all is a little steep. You need a lot of affinity between characters to view these scenes, and while this is something to work towards and a natural use of the mechanic, some of the requirements are a little too stingy. It's impossible to experience them all unless you do a fuckload of grinding with every possible pair of characters, so it inherently limits how many people will get to experience them. Only the mega fans are going to go out of their way to meet these requirements. It's not as accessible as something like the social links from the Persona games, or even just the plethora of dialogue in something like The World Ends With You. Forcing players to work this much to get more out of the characters is a bit unreasonable. While the heart-to-hearts aren't necessary viewing to understand or even enjoy the characters, I don't think anyone would deny the opportunity to learn more about this cast if they were offered the chance to. At the very least, the avenue does exist, even if you need to put in work to experience it. Some people might even like the amount of effort it takes, since it serves as a reward for completing enough content. I don't agree with that perspective, but I can sort of see it. Relationships take work, so there's no better way to implement that than to make it something you have to put effort into. I know that I've been spending a lot of time talking about the characters and junk, but I don't want to give anyone the wrong idea. While characters are at the center of Xenoblade Chronicles, one of the stronger aspects of this game is just how alive the world feels. A lot of games have this issue with storytelling where it feels as though the world revolves around the player rather than the player themselves being a part of the world. I don't necessarily have an issue with this per se, but you don't really see many games go for the latter. I get why, since the last thing you want is for the player to feel meaningless, but what this results in is some artificial world building. Aspects of the world feel less designed with purpose, and are more so that way for the sake of the narrative. In contrast, Xenoblade Chronicles' world feels alive and constantly evolving. The happenings of the Bionis and the Mechanis don't solely revolve around the main cast. Rather, they feel like cogs in a much larger machine. The impending war between the Homs and the Mechon would happen regardless whether or not the characters were involved in it. While the main cast is important and they are proactive in the narrative, it never feels like events take place for the sole purpose of furthering their story. Something that I really like about the world building is that the game isn't afraid of making dramatic alterations to it. There's an entire town that just gets outright deleted at some point, and any quests that you haven't done there are no longer accessible. Annoying for those trying to get 100%, but honestly, it's really cool. Like, when's the last time a game just had the balls to make a large chunk of content just outright inaccessible for the sake of the story? It's stuff like this that keeps the world of Xenoblade Chronicles from feeling stagnant or just set dressing. The events of the story have real consequences on the world, and you get to experience that firsthand, with the aftermath being left over as a grim reminder. Though, just like all those in life, they're only temporary. As long as we have people we can rely on, it's possible to build ourselves back up and make the most out of a bad situation. While I never completed the Colony 6 redevelopment quest, I think that its mere existence goes a long way in enforcing this idea. It's just a shame that it's pretty uninteresting from a gameplay perspective. This is the boring part about working as a team. A character that I've neglected to put much focus on so far is Shulk. He's by far the most fleshed out character in the game, and is the one that gets the most amount of development in the story. Not just because he's the protagonist, but because his abilities and role as the Monado wielder play a large part in the narrative. One of Shulk's most recognizable powers is his ability to see into the future. Not only are these visions presented as a gameplay mechanic, but they're also an important part of the story, and by extension, Shulk's characterization. Seemingly at random, Shulk will have small glimpses into the future that portray upcoming events in the narrative, whether that be encounters with new characters or even the death of one of his party members. Whenever one of these visions happens, Shulk spends a lot of time thinking to himself about what it means in the grand scheme of things and how to change their outcome. While there are times when Shulk is able to find a solution and save someone's life, they're outweighed by the times where the premonitions become reality. What this results in is Shulk developing some really bad habits. He develops a hesitancy to tell his friends about what he sees, instead opting to shoulder the burden on his own. Shulk also begins to adopt a defeatist mindset. He starts to question whether or not it's possible to change someone's fate, and if meddling in that is only going to delay the inevitable. While Shulk cares about the people around him, his critical flaw is forcing himself to endure the expectations that come with being the Monado wielder on his own. While he doesn't actively say that he thinks he's above his teammates, he ends up not treating them as equal by withholding what he sees from his visions to himself. What I like about this character flaw is that it's handled in a very natural way. There's no big argument about Shulk being selfish or not trusting his comrades. Rather, it all amounts to Ryan, Shulk's childhood friend, telling him, "Hey, we're a team. Just let us know next time." This assurance is all that Shulk needs to adjust his mindset. Shulk's friends trust him with their lives, so he should offer them the same courtesy. While it does take a little while to break out of those bad habits, Shulk does take the effort to try to open up to his comrades whenever he has a vision, though this is still something he's reluctant to do. It's an interesting flaw for this character to have, and while not his primary character arc, this insecurity goes a long way in grounding him. However, if we are going to talk about Shulk, then it's impossible to not mention the real journey he goes on. Shulk's primary motivation for the first half of the game's story is one rooted in hatred. He wants to avenge his childhood friend Fiora, who suffered a painful death at the hands of the Mechon at the start of the game. In Shulk's own words, he won't rest until he's killed every last one of them. This one-track mind results in a few times where Shulk's emotions get the best of him. He's unable to properly cope with the loss of Fiora, and because of that, he's easily able to be consumed by his rage and makes rash decisions. However, Shulk's entire worldview is flipped upside down once he learns that the Mechon we've been fighting aren't just these soulless killing machines. In fact, it's revealed that the faced Mechons are actually being piloted by mind-controlled Homs, one of which being Fiora, who seemingly doesn't have her memories. This reveal is meant to get the player guessing, and it completely changes the course of the story. It makes you rethink how the Mechon work and what exactly their goal is. They're able to demonstrate a much higher sense of thinking than just primal instinct, and because of this, Shulk's quest goes from one of vengeance to one of curiosity. Shulk is a smart guy, and as a result, he's very analytically driven. Seeing the Mechon have an ability to hate and strategize makes him believe that they demonstrate more humanity than they give them credit for. Discovering that his fellow Homs, even if unwillingly, are involved with the happenings of the Mechon forces Shulk to rethink what he knows about them. One of the most powerful scenes in the game is when Dunban is about to kill Metalface, but Shulk steps in to protect him. Shulk has every reason to let Dunban kill Mumkar. He's responsible for attacking Colony 9 and getting them wrapped up in this whole mess to begin with. But at this point in the story, Shulk is able to let go of his anger and focus on the why behind their actions. Shulk's journey starts off one about vengeance, but his main character growth is him letting go of that anger and coming to a new understanding. No better is this demonstrated than with one of the main antagonists. The leader of the Mechon army is a Machina named Egil. Long ago, the people of the Bionis and the Mechonis actually lived in harmony, though one day, a man wielding the Monado named Zanza would invade the Mechonis, and while he was eventually defeated and imprisoned, Egil felt betrayed and wanted to avenge his fallen brethren. He amassed an army of his own and took to invading the Bionis, swearing to wipe out every last being there. Egil is meant to serve as a dark reflection of Shulk. They have very similar motivations as to why they fight, and because of that, Shulk is able to empathize with him. While Egil poses a direct threat to the world due to his desire to destroy the Bionis, he also serves as a metaphorical obstacle for Shulk's character development. It's the final test to show how Shulk has grown and changed throughout his journey. Egil is what Shulk could have become if he wasn't careful, and even though the two stand in opposition, Shulk has no intention of killing him. In the end, what sets these two apart is that Shulk is willing to exercise forgiveness and not give in to his desire for revenge. Xenoblade Chronicles has this strange ability to harness an emotional response from the player very well. The game started off as a relatively simple and standard revenge story, but over the course of the narrative, shifts into one about forgiveness and compromise without feeling unnatural, which is impressive considering how much of a dramatic shift the story takes about halfway through the game. Sometimes, when I think back on what happens in the narrative of this game, I think that it's a little too crazy at points. Some might even say that it jumps the shark in a few areas. But for me, whenever I think of anything that stands out as a little distracting, my mind immediately drifts to the emotional payoff of those reveals, and suddenly I don't mind as much. Whenever something kind of silly happens in the story, I know it's leading up to some of the most hype shit I'm ever gonna see in a video game. For example, Fiora being alive has the potential to lessen the impact of the cutscene where she's quote-unquote killed off, but by the time you're officially reunited with her and she rejoins your party, it's hard to not feel some emotions from it. This was the litmus test that proved that I was in love with the characters of this game, and I wanted to see where things would go from here. Though, if there were some things I could critique about the storytelling, then it would be the game's nature to play its hand too early. The game teases character revelations in a way that takes me out of the story more than anything. Like, instead of foreshadowing a character betrayal, they almost outright say it's going to happen directly to the player, rather than allowing them to piece it together themselves. I'd rather go without this stuff being shown to me early, and just be surprised as to when it happens. I can only assume it was done to keep people from getting bored of the story, almost acting as a promise of something interesting happening in the future in case they were losing interest. Dixon's betrayal near the end of the game almost had no impact on me, since the game had him say the most evil shit in the world just outside the character's earshot. This reveal would have been so much more effective if it was a tightly kept secret and wasn't borderline spoiled to the player. This isn't the only time when this happens, by the way, and this tendency stands out as an odd blemish in what is otherwise great storytelling. At the very least, some of the best surprises are kept hidden from the player, and after settling things with Edgil, we're hit with a twist that I honestly never saw coming. The true nature of the Monado is shrouded in mystery for almost the entirety of the game. We know that it's a weapon that's effective against the Mechon, however, its origin and ability to allow Shulk to see into the future are secrets kept close to the chest. While we are given some glimpses into how the Monado came to be, it's not exactly enough to paint a full picture, and ends up being an anomaly in the game's world. For a blade that's so important to our journey, it doesn't quite sit right with Shulk that we never received a full answer for its creation. That is, until we defeat Edgil in combat and the rug is suddenly pulled out from under us. We've heard quite a bit about Zanza throughout the game, and while we're initially led to believe that he was this giant trapped on Prison Island, it's revealed that Zanza is actually the Monado. Well, sort of. Alright, stick with me on this one. So Zanza is actually the creator of this world. Long ago, a scientist named Klaus was working on an experiment to create a new universe. He had lost all faith in mankind and was looking for a way to reach divinity. His experiments were successful, but this came at the cost of completely destroying his old universe. Zanza was reborn as the Bionis, and his collaborator Maneth was reborn as a Mechanis. At first, the two lived in harmony, but as time went on, they felt an overwhelming sense of isolation, so they created life in their own image. However, as time went on, the people of the world grew a desire to venture off and explore whatever lies outside of their homeland. Knowing that this would result in his death, Zanza orchestrated a plot to continue the cycle of war and death so that the Hom's life force would be cycled back into himself, sustaining his life even after he was long forgotten. Maneth disagreed with this philosophy. She believed that the time for gods and rulers was up, and that they could rest peacefully knowing that the world didn't need them anymore. This difference in ideology resulted in the two titans clashing swords, eventually ending with both of them striking each other down. However, before Zanza's death, he created the Monado and placed his soul inside of it. Zanza would possess the body of its wielder and manipulate them into continuing the cycle of violence for his own sake. Zanza used his connection with fate to manipulate Shulk, showing him visions of the future so that he could accomplish his goals. And after gaining enough power, Zanza is able to restore his true form, and plans to destroy and regenerate all life so he can effectively live forever. That's right, the final boss of the game and the main antagonist is the Monado itself. This twist makes you completely rethink the entire game, and while it might seem a bit confusing at first, the game fully explains this stuff. Trust me, it isn't all just dumped on the player during one cutscene. Zanza's reawakening might seem a bit disconnected from the narrative, but from my perspective, I find it to be the perfect finale for this story. For most of the game's plot, Shulk has been battling with the expectations that come with the Monado. The power granted with this sword has made him a hero, though at some point, he believes that he's only courageous and reliable because of the Monado. The battle against Zanza represents two things. Obviously, this fight reinforces the idea that fate isn't set in stone and that we all have the opportunity to break free from those shackles, but it also serves as the ultimate test for Shulk as a character. This is his opportunity to prove himself that he's far more than just the Monado. It wasn't the sword that made him a hero. It wasn't Zanza's visions that gave him the courage to fight for what he believed in. It was his own strength, determination, and friendships that got him to where he is now. It's cheesy for sure, but you know what? I'm all for it. Seeing Shulk use his own strength, his own Monado, to cut down Zanza in a single attack made me realize that, yeah, this is probably one of the greatest games ever made. If you were to tell me a few months ago that Xenoblade Chronicles would end up becoming one of my favorite games, then I would have thought you were nuts. My taste in RPGs is fairly reserved, and I've noticed that over the years, I struggle with experimenting with the games that I experience. I have a very safe mindset when it comes to the franchises I try out. The last thing I want to do is dump a bunch of time and money into a product, only to come out not liking it. While I've always had a passive interest in Xenoblade Chronicles, part of me was afraid that I would end up not liking it. However, after sitting down and engrossing myself in its world and characters for over 70 hours, I can safely say that any of those thoughts have been completely squashed. I love this game. I think the length of this video is more than enough proof of that admiration, and I feel like an idiot for taking as long as I did to get around to it. The combat system is fun and addicting, offering plenty of customization and variety to keep the player engaged. The world is huge and packed to the brim with detail that makes it feel alive, and the story and characters resonate with me a lot. That's not to say that it's perfect. There are quite a few areas where I think the game falls a bit short, mostly on some of the aspects of the game design. There are a few decisions made here that don't quite sit right with me, and I'd be lying if I didn't acknowledge those flaws. But truth be told, it was never enough to detract from my enjoyment all too much. Some might say that I'm being a bit too generous with my praises. I can already see an army of comments telling me that I'm just in the honeymoon phase, and that in a few weeks' time, the magic will be gone. While it's impossible to say whether or not that will be the case, I'm confident that everything I've said in this video are my true feelings. I deliberate a lot on what I write in my scripts. Some might even say I do this to an obsessive degree, but that's because I don't want my videos to become obsolete due to a lack of passion. This video is almost an hour long, not just because I have a lot to say about Xenoblade, but because I feel passionate towards it. Yeah, sure, there are times when I think back on the experience and feel a little shaky about some of the decisions, but then those thoughts are outweighed by all the stuff that I loved about the game. Xenoblade Chronicles is a game of peaks and valleys, but as a whole, it's one of the most genuine and well-crafted games that I've played from this era of gaming. I think I get it. I think I finally get what's attracted so many people to this series. I love Xenoblade Chronicles, and I hope that this video is proof of that.
The Monado. They say that before time began, it was wielded by the Bionis. The same Bionis that we all live on. It must have a secret. If I can just unlock the secret of its power.
Shulk!
Fiora!
Ah, the breeze feels so good.
Yeah, I'd forgotten what it feels like. I never thought it could be so quiet here.
One large megaman, 10 carriers, and an unknown number of units emerging from the carriers.
Screams were music to my ears. My claws slid right through her soft flesh, like a hot knife through butter.
I'll kill
It is not only you that is the right. Every living thing has the freedom to choose the path they walk.
Hey everyone, thanks for watching. I'd like to give a special shout out to all of my channel supporters whose names are on screen now. It's because of these lovely people that I'm able to make videos at the pace I do currently. These videos take a while to make, so if you're at all interested in helping out and donating, you can do so through my Patreon or channel memberships. I have a few things I can offer in return, such as early video access, a special Discord role, and even some behind the scenes content on occasion. Every donation helps, and if the rewards I mentioned sound interesting to you, then you can find out more by following the links in the description. Speaking of special thanks, I'd like to extend a huge thank you to my friend Accursed Jesse for helping me with getting additional footage. And a massive thank you to my other friend JP2427 for helping with the music video you just saw. He was the one who provided me with the methods of getting the footage needed for that montage, and without him, the idea would have just been dead in the water. Thank you so much, man, for being so patient with me, and I'm very happy with the results. In terms of future projects, the next video is going to be the Nocturne Challenge run I've been talking about for a while now. I've had all the footage recorded and the script basically completed for a while now, but due to last minute complications, it ended up getting shuffled in the video list. It'll be the next video for sure though, so I doubt you have to wait too long for it. As always, if you'd like to stay up to date with that and other upcoming videos, then feel free to follow my Twitter and join my Discord server. Both will be linked in the description. Once again, I'd like to thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you all next time.